Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Because Money podcast. Today we're talking about Eric and Elsa. And that's about all I have to say. So Rob, it's on to you.
Thanks, Jackson. Well, Eric and Elsa, I mean, the financial facelift article in the Globe and Mail that spawned a hashtag and a parody Twitter account and countless scorn throughout the blogosphere, I guess. It's just a quick background, I guess. Pretty much every major newspaper does one of these kind of family profiles where they look at somebody's financial situation. They have some kind of an issue. They bring in a financial planner and try to solve that issue in 1,000 words or less, I guess. And so this one particular financial facelift on the Globe and Mail was Eric and Elsa, and it was so ridiculous that it started out as a doctor who worked 1 day a week and taught at a university for 1 day a week. I think he made $300,000. His wife was a dentist on maternity leave. They had 5 children. I think all together they brought in $360,000, soon to be $450,000 a year, and talking about living in a relative's home, rent-free. I believe that house was up for sale, or for some reason they needed to get out of that house. So the problem was they couldn't afford, I guess, a down payment, or that was the argument, I guess, or the struggle, I guess, was how could this professional couple, they can't make ends meet, and what do they need to do? And so obvious to many readers was, well, you should probably work 1 more day a week. You're only working 2 days a week and 1 in a clinic, and you could probably make another $50,000 to $100,000 doing that, and problem solved. Obviously, there's some spending issues that need to be got under control, but the readers obviously started to point that out. And then, I don't know, I'll kick it over to Sandy. What happened after that? It was just a whole cluster of events that people went crazy over this couple, and the shoddy journalism basically that ended up happening afterwards.
Yeah, cluster is right. Yeah, suddenly it turned into, instead of 1 day a week, in fact, he worked 80 hours a week. And instead of $6,000 a month in professional fees, it was suddenly $6,000 a year. So that dropped, and obviously that changes everything about that financial facelift. And no longer is the advice, which was in the facelift originally, work an extra day. Now the advice is, obviously it's something completely different. And so then the story then turned into, now he works over 100 hours a week. Anyway, there continue to be kind of these completely different corrections, but
buried underneath the whole story, right?
Yeah, buried in italics under the story. And then the rhetoric sort of, there's all kind of the funny things and the ironic and the Twitter eye rolling, but then kind of the Globe and Mail and a bunch of very serious people kind of started chastising everyone, and then Rob Carrick came out then the next day with another article that said, well, not another, he didn't write the first one obviously, but he came out with his own opinion piece, which was, mocking Eric and Elsa is easy. Let's talk about the wealth gap and the 1% and that sort of thing. We're all Eric and Elsa, you're just mad that they're rich. And again, I think that's not really the point of what most people were angry about. So it's just all around crazy.
We're really happy to be joined by Alexandra Macqueen, who has helped out on some of these financial facelifts in the past. And welcome, Alexandra, and maybe give us your take on this particular story, and maybe tell us about how they've gone in the past in terms of what kind of details you get from the journalist and from the couple.
Well, I think it's really, there's a lot of different places we could go with the whole financial facelift phenomenon, because as you pointed out, I think there's certainly the Globe and Mail has been running a financial facelift for many, many years, and the Financial Post does one as well.
Yeah,
I think Money Sense, the Star does one every week, Money Sense, and there's probably others. There are advisor publications that certainly do case studies where people write in. So there's an appetite for this kind of financial advice. There's clearly people want it, and lots of readers like it. Lots of people say to me, and I've certainly heard many times, this is my favorite part of the Globe and Mail. I love to get it on Saturday morning. It's the first thing I turn to. It's so interesting to read. So one question that's really there for me is, why do we like these so much? Why do people seek financial advice out in that forum? And why do we as Canadians love to read financial advice that's delivered via these kind of really short snapshots?
Jackson, let me throw that over to you. What do you feel? How do you feel about these financial facelifts? Are they kind of voyeuristic? Do you like kind of diving into this and seeing how this side of the world lives?
Well, I don't really find much value in them personally. To be quite honest, this is the first one that I've actually read from start to finish. And as I was reading it, it was pretty much, my reaction was, really? Really? These guys need help with their, like, to me, I was completely blown away. And again, if you read the story that was there before versus reading the story now, you can kind of read this one, okay, yeah, they need a little bit of help. But I mean, this cat was working 1 day a week as a doctor and 1 day a week as a professor, making over $300,000, and he's putting his kids in private school. They bought $1 million house. They got a live-in nanny, and you just kind of go with, wow, these guys are clowns. They have serious issues. There's no way that how is this relevant to anyone? This is just straight Globe and Mail getting people to read the paper because it's outrageous. And that was, I think, the reaction. And I took the bait. I went to my meme maker on my phone and I started sharing memes on Twitter. Because why? Because retweet. I mean, it's happening. This was like, it's just pure gold. And the hashtag Eric and Elsa is just, I mean, it's hilarious. I mean, I watched somebody today on Twitter say, ooh, I don't have that kind of money. That's Eric and Elsa money. So, I mean, it's already becoming a thing to make fun of them. But, I mean, if he's actually a doctor working 80 hours a week, I don't begrudge him. Hey, you went to school for 43 years or however long it is to become a doctor. Certainly not going to begrudge you for making the money. So, for me, it's not about the wealth gap. It's not about making fun of the 1%. It's just straight up, the story had bad facts. So how do I feel about financial facelifts in general? Meh. How do I feel about this one? Oh, it was fun to roast, but it wasn't really the truth that we were roasting. So how do I feel about it now? I say we still roast them because it's kind of fun.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the journalism then, because obviously this is a kind of the sensationalist look at things, and Alexandra, you mentioned that it's often people's favorite look into the paper to dive into somebody's finances, and so obviously there's value there from the newspaper side of things. They're getting eyeballs on these types of articles, and so does the Globe and Mail care that we're all making fun of this? I noticed that the next day they're in Rob Carrick's column, so on Twitter, the Globe investors saying, here's Rob Carrick's take on this, and they're using the hashtag Eric and Elsa, so they're using this to kind of further along their page views and more eyeballs on their site, gawkers linking to them and just mocking them. Do they care? Or is it just more eyeballs there? Do they care about the integrity of it, I guess?
Well, I'm going to speak as somebody who has participated as the planner in 2 of those columns. So the first one I did was kind of accidental, and the scenario was very unusual. So it was really not a relatable scenario for most people, but it was a woman at age of 82. Her situation was very unique, and nobody contacted me after that and said, wow, this is a relatable story, and can you help me out with my finances? And then they asked me to do another one, which was much more common to kind of an ordinary scenario that a Canadian might find themselves in. It's a professional couple, stay-at-home mom. We have 2 kids to put through university, and we want to know, can we meet that goal, put them through university, and then also retire early? So I think that's kind of like the average Canadian Globe and Mail reader's exact scenario they want advice on. But my thought about the process is, I'm no journalist. I provided financial planning advice, but it's such a truncated little snapshot, and yet there's this very kind of absurd specificity. So it's like, if John and Erica save, this much per year, then in 2017 they'll have $593.382. Like, it's very, very bizarrely specific, and I have to wonder, do people really read that and get anything from it?
Yeah, and I think they want to read how other people are living, right? We all want to peek inside our neighbors' finances, and I see that they have, I hear all these people that, keeping up with the Joneses, and I see the 2 brand new SUVs and the $500,000 house or the $1 million house, and I want to think that they're drowning in debt because no one can afford that, and so these kind of give us a little peek inside at that. So maybe we can confirm that, or I don't know.
I think they tread a line between, I think on the reader's part, they want the role of the financial planner is to sweep in and kind of spank the client. Oh, you've done this, and this is not good, and you should do this other thing. But also the role of the journalist, I think, or the framing of the piece is designed to add kind of relatability and kind of a pleasant wrap-up, like, look, here's their scenario, and if they do this one thing, then everything is solved. So there's this kind of very, I said truncated, but very, people often don't have one issue in isolation that if you solve it somehow, that everything falls into place.
I think that leads into something that Sandy talked about leading up to this, was about this kind of the soundbite advice. How could you possibly, solve somebody's dilemma in that 800-word column? And maybe throw it over to you, Sandy, and talk a little bit about, what's your reaction to these columns, and are they helpful? Are they hurting anybody? And what, are people actually getting valuable advice out of something that can be, again, like you said, truncated down to a column?
I think it's far-fetched to believe that somebody with a similar background, let's say a stay-at-home mom and 2 kids to put into university and the desire to retire early, if we use that as an example, it's far-fetched to believe that someone would read that financial facelift and say, oh, then therefore me and my spouse will do X, Y, and Z because the facelift couple did. I sincerely doubt that that's the reason for financial facelift or for the Money Sense ones, although those tend to be longer. I don't think that's the reason that they're written. They're written for kind of economic voyeurism light in a way. So yes, it's to establish the principles. It's to say, yes, if they think about their TFSA in this way instead of in that way, or if they decide they're not going to fully fund their child's RESP. So there are some good grains of information or ways of thinking, but I don't think they hurt people either, to answer that question, but there's no nuance. Eric and Elsa could have been before, the story as written could have been a reflection of true facts, and much of the nuance that would have made that a legitimate planning problem is lost in 800 words. So what if there was, I used this example multiple times already, but what could possibly be the fact that could explain that couple, not in a way that's acceptable to me, because they don't need to explain themselves to me, but in a way that would mean the answer is not just work 1 more day a week. So maybe they have 5, severely disabled children at home, or, they work with charity the rest of the time. So in 800 or 1,000 words, there is no way to talk about the values that this couple has and why this is a particular problem from them. There is really only, set of facts, planner equation, solution, everything is done, and on to your next column.
And I think that it's worth thinking about, we've said that this doesn't hurt the people that receive facelifts, but I think it probably doesn't help them either. Mm-hmm. And there's 2 things that I think about, why people, so clearly people write in, they want this financial advice, they want the idea that somebody who's perceived as an expert is going to look at their scenario and provide some kind of impartial professional advice. So tells me that they don't feel that they're getting that now. And that to me is a big question about, well, why is it that they would feel like the Globe and Mail's 800 words is worthwhile? If Eric and Elsa, if they were ever, revealed in their community, I think, I wonder about future financial facelift people, if they're going to say, I'm not willing to risk the potential worldwide scorn that can be heaped upon me from participating in this. But the other part of it, so apart from thinking, hey, the Globe and Mail, this 800 words is going to help me, is the dilemmas that people bring. So I've been reading this thing for more than 10 years, are often extremely basic, or at least as they're characterized in the column. So people aren't finding the advice that they think they need presumably, in their community. But their questions are very basic, so the level of financial literacy seems... That's, to me, where I would go to, like, why do these financial facelifts exist?
And your first point kind of leads me to what I found interesting when the Globe, I think they published an article. It was like a letter to the editor, questions to the editor of why, and it was why do these kind of 1%ers get profiled all the time?
Right.
And so their answer was basically, well, we welcome all of these, all types of different profiles. However, we kind of lose people at, we want to take your picture, we want to share,
right.
More details than many people are willing to share. And so what we typically end up with is the couple with the defined benefit pension plan and either higher income or boatload of assets. And they're wanting to know and just like you said, maybe they're not getting that advice in their community, but they're wanting to know, how best to optimize this, or can I meet 2 or 3 of these goals? So I thought that was interesting on kind of who writes in, and I believe that. I believe that, and maybe it's about the oversharing that people with what they feel are financial problems, or they're buried in credit card debt or
right.
consolidation loans or whatever. They don't want to share that for fear that might get out, or if anyone's ever read the comments on a Globe and Mail article, you certainly wouldn't want to be featured in it.
I wonder, though, it's something we talked about before this episode began. I mean, Alexandra, you've been reading them for 10 years. Do you think that someone with a boatload of credit card debt instead of a boatload of assets sees themselves in that call? Would it even occur to them that they're in a situation where a little bit of cash flow planning might actually help them? Right?
No, I think that that's exactly right, that you have to think that things are basically okay, to think that a quick, anonymous, sort of third-party review would be helpful. You can't think things are dire, because then you'd seek a different solution.
And the funny thing is, I think the ironic thing about the fact that, or what seems to be the asset level, assets, they have access to relatively, kind of fee-friendly advice. People with more money tend to have access to better or kind of more full-service planning firms that may or may not also do investing, but that tier of planning has always existed. If you're represented as a percent of their investable assets, it's way more expensive for them. So I would think that the idea of a free, anonymous, work with a financial planner would seem more appealing to somebody that doesn't have access to that. The end.
Okay, I'm going to take, and I want to start talking about the journalistic integrity here, because there is some serious problems with this story. And can we think going forward that there's even accuracy in any of them? I mean, the outrage, the outrage was there for a reason. I mean, for me, I wonder, why did this guy write in the first place? Why is he having financial troubles? I mean, they're making $450,000 a year. They've got no debt except maybe a 2.4, so it's a variable rate on a lot at 70%, probably a credit union. I mean, there's a lot of things you can take away from their situation. Why is he having a hard time getting a mortgage? Well, maybe he's got a professional corporation. He's writing down his income. There's probably reasons, but the article just doesn't get into it. The facts aren't there to actually give the full picture, and the facts that are there are wrong. How many times did they make mistakes? They made a mistake on how much they made, how many days a week they made, then how many hours a week he worked, then they drew that back down. I mean, you might as well just completely rewrite the article and change the names to other people in Frozen. Have you noticed that, by the way? Both Eric and Elsa are Frozen characters? Yeah.
That's Elsa, by the way. I've watched it many, many times, as Sandy probably knows too. Just background on the income versus expenses. So for anyone who didn't read that article, it was they made $25,000 a month, and they spent 31.
Rob, just let that sit in.
Yeah,
$25,000 a month.
A month.
But hold
Working
on.
1 day a week.
And they spent $31,000 a month, right? So the first error was that in the expenses there was a huge mistake, and that was that they somehow spent $6,000 a month on professional fees and dues, and that turned out to be $6,000 a year. And so they talked about in the article was this gap of $5,000 a month. Well, there it is, right? And so they changed the story completely. Just with that one error, and let alone the working, you need to work one more day a week, but actually no.
The advice was work another day a week, or go into debt and borrow $1 million from your parents until your kids are in college.
Wait a minute. We're talking about two different things. You're getting angry because they're rich and 1%, Jackson. But let's go back for 1 second. Let's talk about this idea of accuracy, though. Because these people are not submitting their actual statements of assets and liabilities. It's a 2-page form. They have to. I've seen them, and Alexandra, obviously you've seen them. They have to self-report what are your expenses, and then what are your assets. What is you name your top 3 concerns or whatever. Again, it's 2 pages. So the author of the report, and I imagine for more than just the Globe and Mail, it's not a fact-checking situation, and I don't fault them for that. I don't think it should have to be, but it's a logic situation.
But the people kept calling on Twitter for this needs to be fact-checked, and I think to myself, well, what is it that the journalist is supposed to do? Is she supposed to confirm that these are living, breathing people?
That's right. So if we have to fact check, that means that the article is meant to serve the people reading it more than it's meant to serve the people who are self-reporting their income. Like if that's what they say they make, and that's what they say that they pay in expenses, then they're the ones that are hurt if there's any inaccuracy, right?
Well, I can really see how this happened. I mean, as a physician, if he says I have 1 clinic day and 1 teaching day, maybe the planner looks at that and says, oh, 2 days, versus going back and saying, what does one clinic day mean? How many hours a week do you work? It seems clear from what was published that step of going back and asking the facelifted person about how many hours were worked, and obviously the guy wrote in afterwards and said, no, I work 80 hours a week.
So does the article get published with the planner's advice before anything goes back to the submitter of the information to say, oh, okay, well, that's cool, I'll work 1 more day a week then?
I'm not aware, in the 2 that I did, I'm not aware that they went back. I mean, I think that what happens is this person opens up the newspaper and says, oh, look, there's my scenario.
Okay.
Oh. And look, there's my parody Twitter account.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was talking to Sandy earlier about in an ideal world, how would this happen? And I think there'd be like a committee, maybe a committee of planners, who would look at this scenario and say, okay, let's what do we need to check out? What do we need to verify? And then what are the strategies we want to propose?
Yeah,
but that's a very different proposition than 600 words banged out between Tuesday and Friday.
Right. And like you said, I can totally see how this would happen. So I've had clients that will submit a form back to me, but because they pay their mortgage 2 times a month or biweekly, and I'm asking for what's your monthly mortgage payment, they don't actually do that math to convert it into a monthly. So it even if that's $100, it skews the numbers and the accuracy that I can give for advice, right? And so I'm sure you've dealt with that, Sandy, and you've complained before about when you self-report the numbers and you're not actually tracking properly your expenses, and you have these round numbers of I spend exactly $1,000 a month on groceries, and you know what I mean. So I can definitely see how those numbers don't have to be accurate, but you could see right in the initial comments, there was a surgeon that came up and there's like, there's no way he's doing that for 1 day a week, so the readers all caught on, and I think that was the big gotcha moment. It wasn't for the readers, it wasn't the monthly payments are out of whack or whatever. it was like, this, you guys missed the boat here?
Well, it was fascinating to me that they kept changing the disclaimer at the bottom. You know, here we're issuing a clarification, and yet the advice remained the same. So clearly the advice no longer is suitable, right? He can't work one more day a week if he's working 100 hours a week or 80 hours a week even. So it just was so unsatisfying, right, for readers, unless you love the
It
tweets, right?
it was very satisfying for quite a few people.
Yeah, it's satisfying for that end, for sure. And I think that, and that's kind of goes back to my earlier comment about, well, what does the Globe and Mail care about here? Is it all the eyeballs on this story? And I think if you change that story, then you lose all those residual clicks that are going to come from when the gawkers of the world pick it up and that sort of thing. So, you know, they can make the little footnote on the bottom, which is, you know, to us, you know, reading it, we think that's ridiculous. You need to change the whole story. But I think they want the eyeballs on that original story to say, you know, this is what the outrage was about, and then here's our little footnote at the bottom.
But it's interesting that there's a whole level of journalistic outrage. So what I see in the Twitter stream is people saying, you know, the public editor of the Globe and Mail needs to be called to account for this. Like there's a totally separate from the advice side of it. There's like, you can't publish things that you haven't verified.
Well, it seems very tabloid-like, right? You know, in the way that they lured in this old audience when it blew up on Twitter and even when some U.S. sites picked it up. You know, that's what it seems so sensationalist.
Well, I'm very curious to see the financial facelifts going forward. I wonder if people who are scheduled to be profiled are now going to say, you know what?
Yeah, it's no way.
It's not worth it.
No way.
So would you do another one as the planner?
Well, it's a good question. I wonder. The reason that I got invited to do one in the first place is I had a friend who wanted a facelift and who is one of the people who backed out because of her concern that she was going to be identified. That just because her scenario was so unique and whatever, that they weren't going to adequately mask her identity. And she's like, I don't want to do it. But then the journalist asked me if I would be interested in doing one. And the scenario was so unusual with this elderly woman's scenario. And I thought, oh, this is actually kind of an interesting puzzle to think about, like my creative juices. But so it was really, I just fell into it with no particular plan to ever do a second one or a third one.
Sure.
So there's a non-answer for you.
Jackson, let's. I think we're close to our time here, but I want to hear at some of the this blew up. I mean, I didn't see it on the. I think it comes out on Saturdays, and I didn't see it on Saturday, but the Sunday, Monday, it was going crazy on Twitter and other blogs were picking it up. But there was some wild stuff before the facts got repurposed, I guess, or got checked. Jackson, what were some of your favorites for when you were following on Eric and Ilsa's hashtag?
Oh man, there's a ton of them. The Eric and Ilsa account is awesome. I mean, breaking the Bank of Canada forecast is really messing with Eric and Ilsa's reno plans. Mo money, mo problems, and why high earners sometimes struggles to pay the bills. People are writing blogs about this. They're making memes. I think our work here is done. Would love to hand off this Twitter account for Canadian Charity Startup. So, I mean, there's some things that are going on. I mean, this happened when? Last Friday? It's now, what, a Wednesday? And it's still very active. Like, on Twitter, it's hourly updates, and I think one of my favorites was that people are saying, "Oh, that's Eric and Ilsa money." Like that's becoming the top dog for money now. Like, ooh, Eric and Ilsa money, cash money, baby. Like to me, it really worked, and I think it was people. I don't think it was people getting around and making fun of the 1%. I really think that misses the mark. I think it was just kind of like, you have got to be kidding me. Come on. It's not about the 1%. I think it was about the bad journalism on this one particular story, and I think people had fun with it, and I don't begrudge them because I was kind of cheerleading. So,
one last question, Alexandra, Sandy. I wanted to so we're talking about the 1%, and the last couple of years it's been this what do they call it? The Yolo mentality. You only live once, and so all the conversation that happened about Eric and Elsa, and maybe it is about the 1%, who knows, behind, like, when you dig deep down. Is this a way that we've now started a conversation to say, well, it's not really okay to YOLO your way through life?
Isn't that always the conversation? I would hope that that's a quiet conversation that's always happening when sensible financial when sensible financial planners are looking at their clients and saying, let's talk about let's lay your investments aside. It's going to be the same old story from Sandy Martin, but how do you spend your money every single day, every single week, every single month, every single year? Let's talk about that. And then let's talk about what you want to do with that and how you're going to invest and what house you're going to build, etc.
Well, I think that Eric and Elsa, whoever they may actually be and whatever their scenario might actually be, are genuinely in need of a plan, right? They could genuinely benefit from some financial planning. I think, though, as physicians, there's a human capital story there, which makes them quite different from, I have no idea what the details of the scenario are, but he could be a radiologist with huge earning potential. Dentists, their scenario is different from salaried employees who have a fairly non-volatile, stable source of income. The amount of debt they're in may be completely logical, depending on their stage of life and their other financial commitments. They could easily afford $1 million house and even the lifestyle they want. This is about consumption smoothing, right? This is a different conversation than fixing up one piece of their finances now. I'd like to take a look at the whole life cycle for them and plot out what's the optimal path for them to spend over their lifetime. You're just smiling at me there, Sandy.
Because I like hearing all those words.
I'm just saying that it's, I said earlier that the people want it seems to me that readers want people in these facelifts to be spanked. But I think that even situations that can look unusual from the outside may not be spank worthy. But it's with this particular case, it's pretty much impossible to say.
That's the thing. You know what? Let's go back then to the fact that it's 800 words, and these are people who we don't know. As much as we want to look at the few brief facts about their life and say you're a total waste of space and how dare you clutter up my British Columbia with your snobbiness, they're people. They genuinely looked for help. Maybe they're misguided. Maybe they're making some poor choices. But there's no possible way, and I think the Globe and Mail is perpetuating if indeed this is kind of 1% voyeurism, Globe and Mail and the financial facelift kind of trend or whatever you want to call it is perpetuating this. Let's just look at their details and judge them based on that and not worry about them being real people.
Well, the Globe is providing the window. We're just merely looking through it.
Right.
And we drew our own conclusions with this one, I think.
And I'm going to leave with a quote from Carrie K. Taylor at Squawk Fox. I'm trying to keep up with Eric and Elsa lifestyle, but the hilarious story corrections are distracting me from work. I think she nails it there. And I think we're out. Goodbye.
Bye, everyone.